By Adam Casalino, PatriotJournal.org. The Supreme Court gamble case is putting all the power in Kavanaugh's hands, and Mueller's in trouble. Looks like it's possible, though unlikely, that Trump's new Supreme Court pick can decide the fate of Mueller's probe. It's possible that the people under the gun by Mueller and pardoned by Trump might be hit again with state charges. That is, if Kavanaugh makes the deciding vote on a new Supreme Court case. From Fox News. At issue in the case heard Thursday is whether and when being tried in state and federal courts for the same crimes is permissible. Under a current constitutional exception, it has been allowed for years. The intriguing relevance to Mueller's investigation would be if one of the defendants charged or convicted in the broad investigation, such as Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, were to be pardoned by the president for various federal offenses. Would a state then be allowed to pursue its own separate charges, including tax evasion or corporate fraud? In certain cases, a person can be tried twice for the same crime, despite the fact double jeopardy is illegal under our Constitution. The exception comes if someone is tried once by a federal court and again by a state court. It's an ugly loophole, but one that's been upheld for over 170 years. A current case, being decided by the Supreme Court, might overturn this precedent. If that's the case, then a pardon by Trump for, say, Paul Manafort would mean he's free from future convictions. As it stands now, Manafort might avoid a federal charge, but be in danger of a state trial. People are looking to Brett Kavanaugh, whose vote might sway the court's decision. In the past, he's voiced concern that changing this exception would make it harder to prosecute certain crimes, such as sexual and domestic violence cases. It also might invalidate the sovereignty of states. But he's also expressed concern that keeping the current conditions violates a citizen's constitutional rights. As it stands now, Trump is in favor of keeping the loophole, as it would overturn years of how our governments operated. But, as you can see, it's a complicated issue. One that we can't avoid. Share if you think Mueller should not be able to override Trump's pardon. By Brian Shaw, Western Journal. It's a shame that President Donald Trump hasn't given special counsel Robert Mueller one of his patented nicknames. It's certainly rife with potential. Bumbling Bob. Ragged Rob. Meaningless Mueller. Or, how about Multi-Million Mueller? Because Mueller was just slapped with a $350 million lawsuit after pushing conservative author Jerome Corsi too far. Corsi, a confidant of Trump ally Roger Stone, recently had the squeeze put on him as part of Mueller's endless investigation into potential Russian collusion during the 2016 election. But unlike some of the other people Mueller has targeted during the course of his investigation, Corsi is refusing to play ball. They can put me in prison the rest of my life. I am not going to sign a lie, Corsi told CNN. They want me to say I willfully lied. I did not intentionally lie to the special counsel. I'm not going to agree that I lied. I did not, Corsi said. I will not lie to save my life. I'd rather sit in prison and rot for as long as these thugs want me to. Corsi went further, blasting his experience with Mueller's investigation. He went so far as to compare it to like being interrogated as a POW in the Korean War. The longtime author was pushed so far that he eventually decided to go on the offensive against Mueller. Originally, Corsi went on a Hell.doc TV interview stating that he intended to file a criminal complaint against Mueller. We're going to say to the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General that the way these prosecutors on Mueller's team behaved with me, and the deal they gave me, which was fraudulent, I believe demands a criminal investigation, Corsi said. Now, as The Hill is reporting, Corsi is hitting Mueller right in his wallet. In a document filed in the District Court for the District of Columbia, Corsi is filing a lawsuit and requesting an injunction as well as a whopping $350 million in damages. Defendant Mueller and his prosecutorial and media staff, acting in their official capacity and personally, also illegally released grand jury information to harm plaintiff Corsi by attempting to destroy his reputation and personal and professional well-being and livelihood, thus also attempting to drive him into bankruptcy, part of the document reads. As The Hill notes, Corsi is specifically alleging that Mueller and his team intended to coerce, extort, threaten, and slash or blackmail him into submission and designed to remove the current President of the United States for political and other improper purposes. Considering how inanely drawn out and unfair Mueller's investigation seems to be, this lawsuit really couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. President Trump offered some much-needed advice to embattled French President Emmanuel Macron. After calling the riots in Paris very sad, President Trump suggested that Macron end the Paris Agreement and give the money back to the people. WSLS 10 reported that President Donald Trump blamed the Paris Climate Accord as demonstrations in France continued to protest over an increase in fuel tax and other grievances. "The Paris Agreement isn't working out so well for Paris," Trump tweeted Saturday morning. "Protests and riots all over France. People do not want to pay large sums of money, much to third world countries, that are questionably run, in order to maybe protect the environment." Macron is facing some of the worst rioting in France's history, due to his climate change taxes. The majority of French people feel their needs are ignored in lieu of global warming. Back in 2017, Macron chastised President Trump when he pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. From Breitbart. U.S. President Donald Trump has weighed in on the growing chaos in Emmanuel Macron's France, calling it very sad and suggesting it is time to scrap the Paris Climate Agreement and return money back to the people in the form of lower taxes. Macron, who has become a hero to left liberals and something of a globalist poster boy after he bucked a populist surge on both sides of the Atlantic to win the French presidency, saw his poll rating crumble to 18% and his people out on the streets in their tens of thousands after he imposed a green fuel tax which fell heavily on rural people and the working class. The essentially leaderless Gilets jaunes, better known as the Yellow Jackets or Yellow Vests to English speakers, have blocked roads and come out onto the streets of Paris in their thousands 4 weekends in a row now, and already forced the French leader to abandon the tax rise, but this has not been enough to mollify an increasingly revolution-minded populace, requiring him to deploy thousands of regular and paramilitary police to try and contain protests which have begun to take on the appearance of a civil insurrection. "Very sad day and night in Paris," observed the U.S. leader. "Maybe it's time to end the ridiculous and extremely expensive Paris Agreement and return money back to the people in the form of lower taxes." President Trump suggested the United States was way ahead of the curve in rejecting the supposedly anti-climate change accord, noting that his country, despite its refusal to sign it, is the only major country where emissions went down last year. President Macron has emerged as the global establishment's major champion for the agreement, as the electoral star of the left liberal mainstream's former alternative leader of the free world, Germany's Angela Merkel, has been decisively dimmed. Macron even threatened to veto a trade deal between the European Union, which negotiates trade agreements on its member states' behalf, and the South American trade bloc Mercosur, after a tropical Trump Jair Bolsonaro suggested he could follow his North American counterpart's lead in exiting the Paris Accord. As the situation in his home country continues to slide out of control, how much longer the embattled French president will remain able to throw his weight around in this manner remains to be seen.